Hello there. Welcome into the show. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or whether you're listening on the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, which are free to download, free to use, and sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I'd love to get your thoughts. 719-247-1313 is the number. Producer Ray standing by, eagerly awaiting your correspondence. Now, you know where most of this show is going, so let's get to it here and start with what we saw on Sunday. Now, I said all last week that the Kings would be an ideal transition series to go from the regular season to the playoffs. Not a team that was going to put up a huge fight and push the Avs to, 7 games, but the way they play could help the Avalanche get locked in for what we deem as really the start of the playoffs, which is getting the winner of the Dallas-Minnesota series. And you saw that play out on Sunday. And I think you give credit to LA here. I thought they played the exact kind of game they wanted to. It was physical, more hits in that game than any other this season. They took away the Avs' time and space, and they made it a very low-scoring game. So I think other than the result, which I know is the most important thing, but the process was very good from the Kings, I thought, on Sunday. But the thing about it is the Avalanche can win this way. They've done it many a time, and that's the trouble with them and why they're the prohibitive favorites to win the Stanley Cup this year, because they don't have to outscore you in order to win games. It doesn't have to be a track meet. Now, don't get me wrong, they prefer it to. I don't think they love playing the type of game that they had to play yesterday, but part of being a Stanley Cup contender and being a Stanley Cup winner, which most of the players on this roster can say that they are, you have to win games different ways, and you have to win that way in order to win Stanley Cup. And the Avs have done it. And so it's kind of a, how would you like the Avs to beat you? Especially in this series with the Kings when the discrepancy in talent is so great. But if the Kings want to play this way and they're able to sustain it, which is a bit of a question, Jared Bednar says the Avs are totally cool with playing a series in this way.
I'm comfortable with that. I think our team's comfortable with that. It's going to be hard to create offense. We had 3 goals tonight. One was disallowed, and I liked what we did on the defensive side of things to sort of minimize the quality of scoring chances, the quantity of scoring chances, manage the puck well. So our guys played the right way and got the job done tonight, and now we got to go do it again.
And I think if there is more of a question with this Avalanche team, it's more how they defend and how they limit other teams from scoring goals rather than them scoring themselves. There's very little worry that the Avs are going to be able to score goals. If there is a weakness, if there is a part of their game that you question a little bit more, it might be their ability to keep teams from getting multiple goals. And yesterday they checked that box, only giving up 1. They don't mind playing this style. As Jared Bednar said, they're comfortable. And they know there are going to be more games like this on the way to a cup final. I just don't think it's the advantage that Kings coach DJ Smith thinks it is.
At the end of the day, they score the most goals in the league. So I'm going to say that, holding them to 2 I think they could ask themselves the same question: is, are they going to continue to win with 2 goals?
And look, if I'm a Kings fan, I love hearing that. Defiant. Right? Nobody is picking LA. I don't think many people are even expecting this series to go 6 games. So if I'm a Kings fan, I want to hear exactly that. I want to hear DJ Smith saying, yeah, how are the Avs going to beat us when they're only scoring 2 goals a game? But if there are only 3 goals available in a game, I trust the Colorado Avalanche in this series to get at least 2 of them. I just do. So even if it's a high scoring game, obviously that is advantage Colorado, but even a low scoring game, as you saw on Sunday, advantage Colorado. It's the reality of this series. And part of the reason why I believe that even in low scoring games, the Colorado Avalanche are the team to bank on is because of their depth. They roll 4 lines. So, okay, you're limiting their top line. Good on you. Here comes line 2. Here comes line 3 featuring Gabriel Landeskog and Nazem Kadri. Like, if you hadn't followed the Avalanche all year and you're trying to figure out, what's the depth like on this team? Because depth is important, right? Just look at their third line yesterday. It's Gabriel Landeskog and Nazem Kadri with Nick Waugh. No other team in the league has that third line. And really the story of game 1 wasn't even that line, although I thought Nick Waugh played very well. It was the 4th line. O'Connor, Drury, and Kiviranta. O'Connor gets the game winner. Should have had another one. We'll delve into that topic later. Here's Jared Bednar on what that line brings to the table.
It's hard work and relentlessness, and along with that, a lot of discipline. Because they're focused every shift to go out. Sometimes they miss shifts. We go with other lines and they come back out, and every time they hit the ice, they're giving it everything they got, and they're playing to the identity of that line and of each other, and they made a huge impact, right? Like they essentially scored 2. 1 was disallowed, and they spent the bulk of their time playing in the offensive zone and pursuing pucks, and I think that's exactly what we need from them. We saw it from them last year in the playoffs, a little bit different line, but it's a highly effective line that I can trust against anybody, and it's all because of the hard work and commitment that they have.
And to that last point from Jared Bednar, the 4th line with Logan O'Connor being the constant has been, even dating back to the Cup run, extremely consequential. It's been a story in every series they've played, including and beyond the Stanley Cup run a few years ago. And like I said about the third line, I don't think many teams are rolling out a 4th line that is as productive and as good as the one the Avalanche are. And they have a clear identity, which may not be totally shared by some of the other lines. So there's a utility in the way that they play the game of hockey. And again, they're just flat out better than their counterparts. They're better than a 4th line that nearly any team can trot out there, especially LA. I mean, here's the fact of the matter. LA has 1 line. It's Panarin, Kempe, and Kopitar. That's it. And they needed a 6-on-4 with the power play and the goalie pool to get their lone goal on Sunday. The difference in this series is the depth, first and foremost. I mean, you could go a lot of different ways with it, but the depth of the Avs compared to the lack thereof of the Kings is what's ultimately going to decide this series. And I think the better question for DJ Smith, the head coach of the Kings, is the question that he said, well, the Avs should be worried about how they're going to beat us only scoring 2 goals a game. The question that was asked about him was the fact that he only scored 1. I don't think they can hold down the Avalanche to 2 goals a game the rest of the way. And even if they can, I would still bet that the Avs are only going to give up 1. I think moving forward to tomorrow night's game 2 and beyond, the Kings, as much credit as I give them for the way they performed game 1, they got to open it up. It felt too much over the course of 60 minutes like the Kings were more focused on stopping Colorado than they were generating their own offense. They had a few flurries here and there, and that's where Scott Wedgwood comes in, and we'll talk about him more in depth later. But I'm watching that game, and I'm saying at some point the Kings got to try and score a goal. And it just didn't feel like they were. Maybe some of that is what the Avs were able to do defensively. But I think it was the Kings trying to come out and set a tone. And fair play to them, they set a tone. But there's a happy medium here between not getting into a goal fest with Colorado, which is, I mean, that's a fool's errand. And just trying, last time I checked, no team has won a Stanley Cup playoff game scoring no goals. So LA is going to have to get out of this a little bit. I mean, they still got to stick to that mentality because, again, they're deciding which way they want Colorado to beat them, but the way they're choosing is much better than the alternative. But at some point, LA is going to have to move a little bit out of that so they can try and generate some offense. I thought Scott Wedgwood was good, but he wasn't busy. They've got to try and come out of their shell, so to speak, a little bit here. And when that happens, that's when they're going to leave themselves vulnerable to Colorado with time and space. It's the pick your poison of going up against the best team in the league. And the Kings, by the way, not being the Kings from a point total standpoint are not even as good as last year's team. The team that kept running into Edmonton every year, this is an even worse matchup. There's an even bigger difference between the two teams. And I think that's what the Avs are banking on. And maybe tomorrow night is physical again. But at some point, LA is going to get desperate. They're going to open things up because they got to try and score goals. And that's when the Avs are going to start really beating Anton Forsberg. They're just outmanned and outgunned. LA is. As to what the Kings want to do, and this is why I said I don't expect game 2 to be a whole lot different, because this is what DJ Smith said in terms of his takeaways from Sunday's 2-1 loss.
I think the only maybe thing I'd take away is we got to be more physical. We got to hit their D more. And I expect that in the next game.
Don't say their D. Don't say that. Say his name. It's Cale Makar. He's talking about Cale Makar. That's who they're going to hit more. And you know, being an Avalanche fan, you know what that means. That's not a good idea. And you saw Adrian Kempe going after Cale Makar last night. Gabriel Landeskog got right in his face. So look, I don't begrudge LA one bit. I really don't. I know in these playoff series, emotions run high and fan bases start attacking one another. I came away with a fair amount of respect for the LA Kings because that game was played the way they wanted it to be played. The problem is they just can't even beat the Avs in that way. But if they're going to go the way DJ Smith is intimating and they're going to start taking shots at number 8, there's going to be a boiling point here for the Avs. And they're going to take out their frustrations on LA physically, but they're also going to take out their frustrations on the scoreboard. So LA, they got to toe this line. They got to do it. They got to lean into it, double down on it. But it's not going to go the way they hope it will. It's just not. So that's already something to watch out for game 2. Will LA take runs at Cale Makar? Because that's their little brother. The Avs are very protective of Cale Makar. But a little spice. Now, it was hard for me to even tell that was a playoff game because you can't find the Stanley Cup logo anywhere. Can't find it on the ice, can't find it on the uniforms. Game was played in the afternoon, which didn't have a playoff feel. But if LA is going to take some shots at Cale Makar, it's going to ramp up and maybe feel more like a playoff game, game 2. But the Avs get it done, played on the Kings' terms or the way the Kings want to play, but the Avs still too much for LA. 2-1, the final. Logan O'Connor and Arturi Lehkonen, of course. Arturi Lehkonen gets one of the 2 goals that were out there for the Avs yesterday. 719-24-7-1313. Take your thoughts on game 1 for the Avs. Coming up next, the most encouraging thing I found in the Nuggets game 1 win over Minnesota. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports, talking Game 1 wins for both the Avalanche and Nuggets. Game 2 between Denver and Minnesota is tonight, 8:30 on Extra Sports 1300. And I think if you look at the two games, there's a couple of common threads between the wins for both the Avalanche and the Nuggets. I think it's grit and depth, I think, were the stories of these two games. Nuggets Wolves, not aesthetically pleasing. For the most part, I don't think it was a well played basketball game. I thought both teams, and time off could certainly be part of it. Nikola Jokic warned us. He said he didn't like sitting and all the other players sitting. I think you saw that. I thought the Nuggets were slow out of the gate. I think Minnesota is dealing with some stuff, especially with injuries, that will maybe hamper their ability to be at their best over the course of the series. We could talk a little bit more about that later, but it wasn't a pretty basketball game. And I think both teams come away thinking that tonight they could certainly offer more than they did in game 1. But as David Adelman explains, there is something to be said for being able to win an ugly basketball game.
It was a type of playoff game that you love to win because it was kind of ugly, and you start the game off and you're known for your offense. And we created really good looks, like I said, and then we were up against it right away, and that's a big thing for a road team to come out, punch the home team in the mouth. That's what they did, after we missed shots, and just the reaction to that, staying together, winning a grimy game. It's good. We're going to have games where we shoot the hell out of it and everything looks pretty and everybody's going to say how good we are. There's no difference. You just win the game.
Just win the game, he says. I think to his point, it's like the Avalanche winning their super physical, tight checking game against LA. When we think of the Denver Nuggets, and David Adelman spoke to this, pretty basketball. The prettiest basketball that you'll find in the NBA currently is played by the Denver Nuggets in the half court. I mean, it's a symphony. It's amazing. But winning pretty and all offense, it's kind of because they're not a great defensive team. So for the Nuggets, I think with the Avalanche, it wasn't a surprise. I think it was a mild surprise that the Nuggets won a game like that, if I'm being honest, because I can't think of a lot of games like that they've won this season. So I understand why David Adelman's pretty excited about what they did. And they don't normally win that way. And a 116-105 game, given all the scoring that goes on in the NBA, that's the closest to 1990s basketball that you're ever going to see. So I think that's the biggest positive or one of them that you pull from this game if you're a Nuggets fan is, hey, it wasn't the Nuggets being just overwhelming offensively, making everything. Jamal Murray catching fire, Nikola Jokic putting up 50-point triple-doubles. Like, it wasn't their best, and yet they still found a way to win that game. And the game flowed in a very Nuggets way, and we've talked about this phenomenon. It is not surprising that the Nuggets fell down early. They always seem to fall down early. They swing the momentum back their way. They take control of the game. It inevitably gets tight at some point, late third quarter, early fourth quarter, and then that's where things get interesting. Are the Nuggets going to pull away here like they did in game 1, or is their defense going to let them down and they lose the game? But what struck me about game 1 is the way they took control. They took control like they normally do after a team, to David Adelman's point, punches them in the mouth. They took control of that game with Nikola Jokic on the bench. They won the non-Jokic minutes on Saturday. Won them. They didn't just survive. They didn't just keep it close. They won. They were +3 with Jokic on the floor, which I'm sure will impact his MVP candidacy. And to throw on top of it, Aaron Gordon wasn't even in the game. He didn't play at all in the second quarter because of the fouls he picked up. So that makes it even more impressive, but there's still a third star that you can't forget about. And how could you watching that second quarter? Jamal Murray. I mean, they don't credit to some of the other guys that I'll get into, but Jamal Murray was the catalyst in that second quarter. He scores 14 points. We'll talk about how he got a lot of those points coming up a little bit later. But I thought he willed them through that second quarter. And it was a situation where the Nuggets, it wasn't that they were trying to maintain a lead. They were trying to get one. And Jamal Murray was the reason why they got it. But two other players to the depth thing, Cam Johnson and Bruce Brown. Now, early in the game, you remember Bruce Brown this last week talking about how he told Cam Johnson they want Brooklyn Cam Johnson. About 5 minutes into that game, I was like, no, we don't want Brooklyn Cam Johnson. He was awful to start the game. Can't say they were bad looks, but he just missing everything. And I was like, no, Brooklyn Cam Johnson, go away. Like Phoenix Cam Johnson. And I think we got Phoenix Cam Johnson as the game wore on. But see that's the trade-off too. If you want to get a player like Cam Johnson going, you have to let him shoot. The idea that Cam Johnson can just sit idly by, and this was part of the thing again with Michael Porter. You keep this guy, camped out somewhere and you don't use him. And then in the fourth quarter, you're expecting him to show up. Like, can't do that. You got to let him get going. And the Nuggets were able to do that. It just looked really bad at first, but it paid dividends down the road. I thought his 12 points were important. And no one was happier to be back in the playoffs than Bruce Brown. That dude was hyped. And the whole reason for him coming back to Denver was the postseason. He took his money, he got his bag, and then realized I'd rather play in the playoffs. Or at least I'd like to be back in the playoffs now that I got my bag. That's probably more accurate. But that dude, he looked like he was making up for lost time. Big plays on the defensive end. He ends up with 5 steals in the game. And I talked about it going into these playoffs, and I'll continue to harp on this. If this Nuggets team goes further than they did a year ago, if this Nuggets team is better, it's because of their depth. That's going to be the main difference. And it's Bruce Brown off the bench type depth, but it's also Cam Johnson, guy not named Jamal, Nikola, or Aaron type depth too. That's going to ultimately make the difference. So I thought that was extremely encouraging after game one, but it starts with Jokic and Murray. It has to be them, and then it's everything else on top of it. What can the Nuggets layer on top of Murray and Jokic? And Jokic, I think, came into the game with a plan that he was going to defer to others. I thought it was very intentional from him because he understands how important it is to get Cam Johnson some confidence, to get Christian Brown going. He can get his points whenever he wants. And he was very quiet early and ends up with 25 points. He can get his whenever he wants. And that's one of the troubling things on Minnesota's side that we'll get into later. But I thought he wanted everyone else to get going, knowing that when it comes down to it, when the game's in the balance, like when Minnesota was making their couple of pushes, there's Nikola Jokic to stem that tide and to keep the Nuggets in front of Minnesota. I thought it felt like the polar opposite of this series 2 years ago, the start to the series 2 years ago. Like Jokic got whatever he wanted whenever he wanted it against Minnesota, which was not the case 2 years ago. Murray being able to kind of fight through the defense, fight through the pressure that Minnesota was trying to put on him. Because of his health, he could not do that. And it just compounded and the frustration built. And then he throws heat packs onto the court. Like, I think it was a very different looking Jamal Murray from 2 years ago. And again, the Nuggets got more out of what Candace Parker and Dwayne Wade referred to on the broadcast as the others, right? Minnesota had DiVincenzo early. I thought DeSomo was contributing, but the big plays that were made in crunch time or to stop runs or to extend runs were on the Nuggets side. Cam Johnson, Bruce Brown, guys like that. So I think it felt like, for all the angst going into this series because of the past history, I think a lot of that is alleviated because I think you saw a 180 from the start of the Wolves series 2 years ago. I think there's, I will say too, with these two teams, I think there's a lot more for both of them to tap into. With all that being said, I think neither team, or I should say both teams, I think are going to be better next game and moving forward. I think we're going to see more skill. I think we're going to see higher scoring games. That one was, for a variety of reasons, a little ugly, but the Nuggets got it done, and we don't usually equate winning ugly to the Denver Nuggets. So good on them for that. 719-247-1313. Again, game 2, Minnesota and Denver coming up tonight at 8:30. More Drive Time Sports after this. Now, I know we're completely focused on postseason games around here, but let's be honest. A series with the Dodgers coming to Coors Field is as close as the Rockies organization is going to get to the playoffs for quite a while. And I think this weekend has kind of lived up to the hype, no? So Rockies get blown out game one. And I'm like, all right. Don't need to be keeping an eye on this at all. I got to lock in for the playoffs, all that kind of stuff. And then the Rockies win Saturday. I'm like, oh, that's nice. And then I hear their catcher, Dalton Rushing, say this.
I think it could have been a little bit of both sides. I think they had a good game plan as an opposing team. And maybe I pitched into their game plan as far as calling pitches. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's odd. Some of those hitters that do what they do, they go up there and they were only the first pitch that was thrown. So it's fishy.
It's fishy. Don't Rushing. Say what you want to say, my man. It's fishy? Wait, you think that this is, the Astros that you're playing or what here? Like, say what you want to say. And look, trust me, Dalton, friendo, no one is more surprised when the Rockies actually look like a capable baseball team than I do, than we all do. Trust me, I speak for everyone in Colorado where we are shocked that after a 7-1 loss in game one that the Rockies beat you game two of the series. Shocked. But come on now. What truly is going on here? There's nothing fishy going on here. Like, come on. You come across as incredibly entitled. Like, you're the Dodgers. Everyone should just roll over for you. Sorry, not everyone's going to. It is, as Robert California would say, it is up to the object whether or not it will be flattened. And the Rockies made a decision Saturday and Sunday that they weren't going to be flattened by the Dodgers. And what a great way for Warren Schaefer and this team to show that times are changing. Like, they don't have the talent to beat the Dodgers every game. Right? And that was in abundant supply on the first game of the series on Friday. But this team, they're not going to back down for the Dodgers. You got to beat them. And what better way to show you're not backing down than swinging at the first pitch, than being aggressive? There's nothing fishy going on. The Colorado Rockies just actually have a game plan. It's not a given you're going to come into Coors Field and win all 4 games. Like, I'm sorry, you live in the land of $500 million deferred contracts and Magic Johnson and all that kind of stuff. Well, you got to work for it a little bit more. New day is dawning at 20th and Blake. How about you use the fact that you are better at every single position, ironically, except for yours, because Hunter Goodman. But you're better than the Rockies at every other position, everything. How about you just beat them instead of accusing them of something? And you're not even accusing. It's fishy. This is like when the Giants broadcaster John Miller used to complain about the humidor. Like, come on, give me a break. Just play ball. You're better than the Rockies. Show it. And then they came out Sunday and lost. The Rockies won again. A third of the Dodger losses this year are at the hands of the Colorado freaking Rockies. Go figure. And they got another one tonight. The Dodgers can't wait to get out of Denver. Some fishy's going on. Yeah, fishy compared to what Rockies history has been, where they just throw out random players and say, let's hope something good happens today. Let's hope the air is just a little bit thinner. No, they actually have a plan of attack. And they're a bunch of young guys that, yeah, many of them went through one of the worst seasons of baseball we have ever seen. But they're young, they're resilient, they're still just happy to be in the major leagues. That don't bother them. I thought it was all over for the Rockies when they went into San Diego and got swept in 4 games. Maybe we got a little April magic left here with these Colorado Rockies. So tonight, the Dodgers will try their absolute best to split the series with the Colorado Rockies. And you can catch most of it before the Nuggets even tip off. You might be able to catch all of it as quickly as baseball games move these days. I think it's a 6:40 start. Good on the Rockies, confounding minds across Major League Baseball. A couple of, 3 Nuggets were named finalists for different NBA awards. Tim Hardaway up for 6th Man of the Year. That's not at all surprising. Jamal Murray, Clutch Player of the Year. I'll be 100% honest. I don't give much thought to the Clutch Player of the Year. Sounds like something that would be given out on a game-by-game basis on NBA 2K. So I don't really care about it. But Jamal Murray was a finalist for that, and I would say clutch players in the NBA. Yeah, Jamal Murray's certainly one of them. I thought he was clutch in Game 1 against the Wolves. And then the big one, Nikola Jokic is one of the top 3 vote getters, despite Luka being eligible. So all of this talk about, Luka has got to be eligible and all this kind of stuff, and then he's not even one of the top 3 vote getters. Now I'm going to say, I still think he deserves to be eligible. And I thought until he got hurt, I thought it was, for me, it would, if I had a vote, it would be down to him and Wemby. So I'm quite surprised that Luka is not one of the top 3 vote getters. But I can't say Nikola Jokic doesn't deserve it. Now, will any of these 3 guys win those awards? No, I don't think so. But in a year that has been as contentious when it comes to especially the MVP, for Nikola Jokic to still get at least enough votes necessary to be in the top 3, I think it says something. Look, as time goes on, all that we'll worry about is whether he won or not. But in the moment, just when you think that Jokic isn't getting the respect he deserves. It's funny. A lot of this, and speaking of performative, we'll get into some performing from the Minnesota head coach coming up after the top of the hour. But a lot of this conversation, a lot of this discourse is performative. Right? People say things because either they're trying to get a rise out of people or they're trying to curry favor with a fan base or something like that. And then it's like when we vote on a presidential election or whatever, like you may say a lot of stuff to your buddies, your coworkers, your family, but ultimately when you go to the ballot box, It's just you and your ballot. And I think it is quite telling about some of the discourse around, or lack thereof. It wasn't, I don't think anybody was, it was like diminishment by omission that was going on. It wasn't that anybody was saying, oh, Jokic averaged a triple-double. Who cares? Jokic led the league in assists and rebounds. Who cares? Nobody was tearing down what Jokic did this season. It was just they weren't talking about it. So that was taken as disrespect, as diminishing his accomplishments. I just think that there were hotter stories. Wemby, Luka. And look, you know, if you're going to vote for Shea and he's going to be your guy, then you should be saying that he's going to be your guy. I don't know that there's been a ton of discourse around Shea other than, yeah, he should be the MVP. But it looked like people were diminishing what Jokic was accomplishing because they weren't talking about it. And now we're seeing when these people get their ballots and it's not performative and it's not about, you know, being on the other side of their co-host for that day, they wrote Jokic in there. I fully expect him to end up third, by the way. SGA, Wemby, and Jokic being the order. But just when you think, oh, Nikola Jokic is being disrespected, nobody's marveling at what he's doing. Well, I think this tells you that there's still a little bit of marveling going on when it comes to Nikola Jokic. So Jokic, a finalist for MVP, Jamal Murray, a finalist for Clutch Player of the Year, and Tim Hardaway up for Sixth Man of the Year. And we'll see how that voting all goes down as we move forward. But 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on game one's Avs and Nuggets. Let's get back to the Nuggets. And I knew this was going to happen after the second quarter of Saturday's game. I'll tell you what it is next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in. Appreciate you watching the show. Anywhere you scroll at 740 KVOR and at Extra Sports 1300. While you're there, like, subscribe, and most importantly, comment. And I can display your comments on the live stream of the show. Of course, texting and calling is still a viable form of communication. 719-24-7. 13-13 tonight, game 2 between the Nuggets and the Wolves, 8:30 tip ish on Extra Sports 1300. And I said in the first hour, it feels like the reverse of the way the start of the series between Minnesota and Denver had 2 years ago. And it's all kind of encapsulated by frustration. The frustration that the Minnesota Timberwolves had in game 1 reminds me of the frustration the Nuggets had early on in the series 2 years ago. And one of the times where that frustration boiled over was McDaniels on Nikola Jokic for no reason other than he was mad about the way the game was going. He did this.
Put back McDaniels. That one's good. Technical foul whistled against
Jaden McDaniels. Just two-hand shoved Joker in the back after the ball went in.
Altitude radio on the call. You heard it on 740 KVOR. That is the Wolves version of Jamal Murray throwing the heat pack. Like, there's frustration that's just visible on people's faces, and there's frustration like you pick up frustration fouls, like you foul a guy a little bit harder because you're angry, or you say something, you get in his face, whatever. McDaniels just pushed Nikola Jokic, just shoved him. Not in the play. And that is it's uncalled for. And it just showcases how frustrated the Minnesota Timberwolves were in game 1 because the answers they had for the Denver Nuggets 2 years ago do not exist in their current form. They just don't. Okay, the Denver Nuggets had problems dealing with Gobert and Towns. Now Towns is gone. Jamal Murray, in large part because of health, had a real problem with the Minnesota defense. He doesn't have that much of a problem anymore. I mean, game 1 really shows you how different these teams are than they were 2 years ago. Even though the core of both teams in large part are intact. I said Minnesota is just different enough. The Nuggets are just different enough for this series to go the other way. And you're seeing that. Minnesota maybe with some thoughts that they were going to come into this series and it was going to be like it was 2 years ago. Like, yeah, they won the season series from us, but this is the playoffs. We get to defend tougher. We get to be more physical. We got this. And then they didn't have this. And Jaden McDaniels is pushing Nikola Jokic in the back. And Chris Finch is going to the podium. I knew this was going to happen. I think this has happened in every series so far. I won't waste Ray's time by having him look at all the post-game press conferences. I'm pretty sure free throws came up in after every single game 1. Why should the Wolves and Nuggets be any different? Here's Chris Finch on the free throw discrepancy.
He initiates the contact, he spills away, and then he gets rewarded for it. Jokic does the same thing. You know, we got to be solid around that. But 16 free throws is a lot. 16 free throws, it's almost as many as we shot all game.
Now, before I get into my thoughts, I'll give you Jamal Murray since he was the guy being called out. Here's Jamal Murray on the number of fouls he drew.
I mean, 4 of them were technicals, before the ball gets in bounds and this and that. So, I mean, I thought I got fouled on every single one of them, so I don't know what everybody's talking about. It's real fouls.
It's real fouls. And look, there's always going to be 1 or 2 that you're like, really? But let's keep it in perspective here. Jamal Murray wasn't shaping his body into an S like Shea does in order to draw contact. Okay, even the one, and this is the one that Minnesota keeps going back to, where Jamal Murray lands on the foot of McDaniels. And it gets, and I don't think that should be a flagrant foul. I don't think there was anything intentional there. I don't think McDaniels was trying to get Jamal Murray to land on his foot. So I don't agree with that rule, but it's the rule. But there's no question that's a foul. You have to let the player land. And Jamal Murray, have you ever watched the guy shoot jumpers? That was a normal Jamal Murray shooting motion, and that should have been a foul. Elevated and be flagrant, I don't agree with it, but that's the rule that the NBA has on the books. I mean, Jamal Murray is one of the most ethical hoopers in the league. He is not someone, if you want, and I know Chris Finch brought him up, if you want to talk about somebody that's a little bit more egregious, bring up Nikola Jokic. Okay, as far as flailing and drawing contact and embellishing and all that stuff, Jokic does that way more than Jamal Murray does. It is a very weird thing to me to paint Jamal Murray in that way, because that's just not who he is. It's more who Nikola Jokic is. But then Chris Finch can't even deliver that message because Nikola Jokic, I believe, shot a free throw, went to line once. That's it. So I think Chris Finch, in his mind, was like, well, when this game is over, I'm going to definitely complain about Nikola Jokic. And then he only goes to the free throw line once. He's like, well, that's off the table. I can't do that. I'm going to talk about Jamal Murray, and I'll just do a drive-by on Nikola Jokic. Here's the fact of the matter. This politicking goes on all the time in the NBA. And it's not a great look for the NBA because it shows that their referees are, for lack of a better word, malleable. Like, you can influence them, and that's not a good thing for the NBA. So this politicking happens, but you take it on a case-by-case basis. And not everybody is doing the Phil Jackson thing, right? Phil Jackson was a master of this. But Phil Jackson also had teams with Shaq and Kobe and Michael and Scottie. It was just another advantage he was trying to glean. When Chris Finch says these things, and I'm going to be fair to the Wolves here, when Chris Finch says these things, it is an indication that they have no answers for the Denver Nuggets. That they are just not able to defend them at the level they were able to defend them 2 years ago. And the fact that he brings up Jokic unprompted, no one was talking about Nikola Jokic and how many free throws he got. He's trying to lay the groundwork for tonight and beyond to make sure that Nikola Jokic doesn't get to the free throw line. But that's what you say when you're beaten. And here's where I'm going to be fair to Minnesota. David Adelman has done this after all of the Oklahoma City Thunder games. And I called it out at the time. David Adelman has to call out the referees with OKC. And you may agree with some of what he's saying. But at the heart of it, he's saying it because if there's not some way that the referees call the game differently, the Nuggets aren't beating the Thunder. And it's the same thing here with Minnesota. Minnesota has to have and understand this, how I mean it and not how it's going to come across. They need the referees on their side. And I don't mean that in a nefarious way. I just mean the referees to kind of see the game the way that the Wolves see it. Or else they're not going to win this series. Because Nikola Jokic kind of stood idly by through most of the game, and then he still ends up with the 25-point triple-double. Right, and I thought Rudy defended him incredibly hard. But it doesn't matter. It's just not going to matter. Rudy Gobert cannot. It's like the Kings with the Avalanche and the physicality. You can't sustain that the whole series. They're going to have to do something different tonight to try and see if there's another way to defend Nikola Jokic, because him one-on-one with Rudy Gobert, I have 47, brother. That's what that's going to lead to. Because there are going to be games where the Bruce Browns, the Cam Johnsons are not going to contribute in the way that they did in game one. And those are probably the games in Minnesota, right? That's the supporting cast usually plays better at home. But then those games will be the games where Nikola Jokic takes over, where he will be looking to get his. Because he knows, as a general rule of basketball, that role players don't play as well away from home. And if Nikola Jokic sets his mind to dominating the basketball game, he's going to, if it's just Rudy Gobert who's guarding him. So I would expect Minnesota to show Nikola Jokic some different looks. And I would expect Nikola Jokic to assert himself more on the game if tonight, Bruce Brown, Cam Johnson, some of these other guys aren't contributing. But the free throw discourse is, I've had about enough of it. I really have. And I know what's coming in 2 rounds if the Nuggets get there. I know it, and I'm not looking forward to it, but it's going to happen. Because we're already seeing it with Oklahoma City blew out Phoenix. Like, Phoenix wasn't even competitive, and yet free throws are a main point of contention in that series after one game. I'm a little tired of it. And when coaches go to the podium and complain like Chris Finch did the other day, like David Adelman has done after almost every regular season game against OKC, it just tells me you are out of options. You have no answers. So you're trying to do this thing. I don't blame him, right? You got to do everything you can. But it tells me that they don't know what to do with Jokic. But I think there's more here. I mean, I think Jamal Murray is not going to shoot that many free throws, not because Chris Finch has influenced the referees, but it's just not his game normally. But I think you're going to get more of a traditional Jamal Murray game at some point. Jokic is going to have a dominating performance. I think that the Nuggets can play better. I think they can do much better. And now that they're in more of a rhythm after so long away before the playoffs started, I think tonight's game is going to be much better than game one. More aesthetically pleasing. The Stars will do a little bit more what you expect them to. I think it'll be an entertaining one tonight. Nuggets, though, recently not good in game twos. So there's a little bit of a trend coming into this one that the Nuggets need to turn around here. And from the Wolves' perspective, I think the Wolves are going to be a lot better. But again, to my point of how much this is a 180 from the postseason meeting 2 years ago, now it's Minnesota who's not healthy. right? Anthony Edwards is not healthy with that runner's knee. And here's the thing, he's not going to get healthier. That's the thing you need to keep in mind. You only get more hurt as the postseason goes on. You do not get healthier. So, and now you have Naz Reid as well, who is extremely limited in game one, and he's got to be one of their best players to win. So I think there are a lot of signs that Minnesota just does not have enough to beat Denver. But we'll see in what I expect to be a better played game than game one tonight. 8:30 tip-off, Extra Sports 1300. Take your thoughts on the Nuggets game one win, 719-24-7-1313. Coming up next, we'll shift back to the Colorado Avalanche because they did only allow the one goal. Pretty good playoff debut for Scott Wedgwood. We'll talk about it next here on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC is making history. Next Wednesday, April 29th, they will be at Dick's Sporting Goods Park taking on the Colorado Rapids in the round of 16 of the U.S. Open Cup. Be there to be a part of that history. Tickets and all the info you need at switchbacksfc.com. It is a 7 o'clock kickoff from Commerce City. Avs take game 1 on Sunday, 2-1. Thought it was a game that the Kings wanted to play, and fair play to them for that, which makes, I think, in many ways a perfect game 1, because there were two things that were lingering questions with this Avalanche team going into playoffs. Not to say that it would ultimately burn them against the Kings, but if you just look at the playoffs in their totality, the power play got some work to do there, certainly after one game. But I think the other thing was, how would this goalie tandem perform, especially Scott Wedgwood, who you may not know was making his first playoff start yesterday. I know his head coach didn't know that.
Scott Wedgwood's first playoff start. Just what can
Ever?
you say about
Okay.
yeah.
Didn't know that.
With that said, just what can you say about his game plan?
I thought he was fantastic. Yeah, did everything he needed to do. He played, obviously bigger stakes, more emotion, but played the exact same way that he's been playing for us all year.
And I think his talent as a goalie, you may be able to question, right? Because he's a career backup until yesterday, never started a postseason game. So I don't think it's totally unfair, although he had a very good regular season. I don't think it's totally unfair to question whether Scott Wedgwood is of the caliber that he needs to be in order for the Avs to win the Stanley Cup. But I feel like Scott Wedgwood has the exact right temperament. Like, listen to him talk about his first playoff start ever. This guy has been in the league for many years, has bounced around from place to place. He finally gets the opportunity to be the guy, game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And this is what Scott Wedgwood said about his performance.
No, it's cool. Obviously, a long career to get to this point, and obviously proud to get a start. A little anxious to get going, but with the 1 p.m. game, you don't really have much to think about it. So just get up, prep, and go. And once we got a few shots on and settled down, crowd was into it. First TV timeout was talking to Blackie, just kind of felt like heart rate was a little high, but once we got going, it just felt like a normal hockey game.
Yeah, and that's also why getting this first seed matters, because you're playing a team in the Kings that you shouldn't have much problem with, and you can get Scott Wedgwood eased into playoff hockey. Apparently, it took him one period to do it, or until the midway through the first period. But I think Scott Wedgwood, listening to him talk, again, I bring up temperament. I just think he's such a chill guy. Goalies can be a little bit odd. They could be a little intense at times, and I think he's just a guy you want to hang out with. And I mean that because I think that the team feels that way about him. Here's Logan O'Connor talking about Scott Wedgwood.
Super positive all the time, whatever the circumstances are. And, we know if we have breakdowns, which are going to happen, he's got our back throughout that. And just seeing his game grow, late bloomer, having the best season he's had in his career right now at the perfect time for our team has been special to watch.
Yeah, he's not a young goalie. I know he's inexperienced in the playoffs, but he's not young. And so I think he can handle this stage, being on it for the first time, a little bit better. And I think his play proved it. He made 24 saves. the Kings weren't dangerous all game long, but they had a few flurries, and Scott Wedgwood was able to stop them when those happened. I mean, we'll see what the plan is as far as the goalies. Do you go to Blackwood game 2? Do you try to get Wedgwood another game and then go Blackwood? Is it just Wedgwood's net now? I mean, Jared Bednar said he'd use them both, so there's the intrigue for tomorrow night. But I think Scott Wedgwood just has a proper perspective on everything. And it's like he went through a lot to get here, so he's not going to let a lot bother him. Right? So, being kind of, he's putting out fires in these other NHL cities, right? Never given an opportunity, maybe felt like he was at risk of being out of the NHL. I just think you go through that stuff and it makes you more prepared. Because you're not getting too high, you're not getting too low. So just the Avalanche getting Scott Wedgwood, and I give Chris McFarland all the credit in the world for this. I think he just got the guy at the right time. I don't know if they were expecting this. And in fact, I know they weren't, because Jared Bednar talked about a few weeks ago the fact that Scott Wedgwood was a backup and how surprising it was that Scott Wedgwood has been a Vezina Trophy caliber goalie after the career he has had. So I think they saw some of the traits in Scott Wedgwood, but I think he's even surprised them. But as you watch him and you listen to him talk, it makes sense, because this dude has been through worse. And it's not that he's just happy to be here. He wants to win, but he is happy to be here. And that's rare for a guy that's making his first career start. You either think this is the first of many, and maybe that's part of it too. What's pushing Scott Wedgwood is that he knows, like, hey, I went through all this time, never making a playoff start. Who knows if I'm ever going to get this opportunity again. I'm going to make the most of it. Well, other younger goaltenders may feel like this is just the start for me. I'll keep going and going and going. Well, ask the netminder in Dallas right now how that's going. Because the thought was, oh, Jake Ottinger, he's going to just be this way for the rest of his career after what he did in that Game 7 against Calgary a few years ago. Not going great for him, albeit one game. But Scott Wedgwood, very good. And yes, the competition level will step up from here, but this is what the Avs have now. This is their task. This is their challenge, and Scott Wedgwood was absolutely up to it as the Avs beat the Kings 2-1 in Game 1. Game 2 tomorrow night on Extra Sports 1300. I mentioned Jake Ottinger. Did not go well for he and his Dallas Stars, but they were one of only a couple of teams in the NHL and NBA playoffs this weekend that did not get the job done at home. So which one of those Game 1 upsets in both leagues are real and spell real trouble for the teams that lost them? That's next here on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. So the Avalanche and the Nuggets did not get upset in game one of their series. In fact, you look across the NHL and the NBA, not many teams failed to take care of home ice or home court in the first round, but a couple did not. And one of the results, I would say both of the results were actually quite shocking. In the NHL, the Minnesota Wild absolutely walloped Dallas in game one. This series that we're all expecting to be this knockdown, drag out 7-game war ended 6-1 in favor of Minnesota. And then yesterday, you have the Orlando Magic, who are all set to fire their head coach, Jamal Mosley. They lose to the Boston Celtics JV team on last Sunday to be in the play-in. Then they lose the first play-in game, have to beat Charlotte just to get into the postseason, and then they turn around and they beat the top-seeded Detroit Pistons. So I would say that both, trying to think what would be, I would say Minnesota beating Denver would not be as big of a surprise if they had done it. But Dallas losing, and it's not Dallas losing because I think just losing the game by a goal or two would be a mild surprise, but they got absolutely destroyed. I think the team out of Detroit and Dallas that should be the most worried, I think it's the Pistons. And I don't think it's this series. I still think Detroit should be able to bounce back and beat the Orlando Magic and eliminate them. But this was my question about the Detroit Pistons all year. Like, I love the way they play, right? And outside of Cade Cunningham, maybe you've started to find out a little bit more about Jalen Duren. But for the most part, you don't know many Pistons players. Okay, so they're a little nameless, a little faceless, but they play hard. They're physical. They try to honor the memory of the bad boy Pistons. And while I didn't like the guys on that team, I do like the guys on this Pistons team. But the question always was going to be with them, okay, now everyone can play at your level physically, right? In theory, everyone is able to play more physical in the postseason. The Pistons' advantage and a big reason why they were able to get the 1 seed is, to JB Bickerstaff and that team's credit, they brought it every night. The effort was there every single night, and that's why I think JB Bickerstaff deserves to be the coach of the year. But now your opponent's focus is on you all the time, 24 hours a day. You're not catching teams on the second night of a back-to-back, third game in 5 days, or a Western Conference team that is looking at playing Detroit because they only make one trip there to be kind of a throwaway. I mean, unfortunately, those things exist in the NBA. And Detroit was able to take advantage and get up to the 1 seed because their effort level was always there. Now everybody's effort level has jumped up. Everybody is allowed to be a little bit more physical. And now you're looking at the Detroit Pistons and you're like, outside of Cade Cunningham, do they have the players to be able to go deep in the postseason? Again, maybe it doesn't cost them against Orlando. But if this Pistons team, they kind of got run out of the gym by, the Knicks last year, and the Knicks are still good, and there's Boston. I think game one showed why I had a hard time believing in Detroit, despite being the number 1 seed in the East, making a deep run, or at least being better than Boston, New York, maybe even Cleveland. They weren't able to get get some playmaking, some scoring, I think, to the level they wanted to at the trade deadline. I just don't think they have the shooters, the scorers to be able to make a deep run. And I think we just got a sign of that in game 1. So Detroit, if I'm a Stars fan or I'm a Pistons fan, I'm panicking more about Detroit long term. As far as Dallas goes, I'm not saying that I would be cool, calm, and collected after my team got blown out 6-1. But one thing I will say, remember the Avs kind of took it to Dallas in game 1 of their series last year. So you don't have to think that far back to go, we can recover from a bad game 1. So there's that. And I do still think Jake Ottinger is one of the better goalies in the league. I know he hasn't consistently shown it this year, but I believe that guy is still in there. Now, if he's not, and if Minnesota comes out tonight and beats him again, then you start to kind of, or at least I start to kind of change my worldview. I got on Pete DeBoer at the end because I thought he was mishandling his goalies, that he was, trashing Jake Ottinger and pulling him out of the game and making him the scapegoat and all this kind of stuff. I didn't think Pete DeBoer handled it well, and I think it was a big reason why Pete DeBoer is no longer the head coach of the Dallas Stars. But if Dallas doesn't, they could lose this series and still come away, you'd still come away saying, oh, Dallas is still a really good team. If Minnesota kind of breezes past them, they're like, was Pete DeBoer right? The body language of Jake Ottinger was horrific in game 1. Like, or you take it the other way and say Pete DeBoer ruined Jake Ottinger. Like, maybe that's the way that Dallas Stars fans will choose to look at this. But I'm not, check in with me tomorrow. Let's see how game 2 goes. Because obviously Dallas is going to come out on all cylinders if they're capable of doing that, because you can't fall down 2-0. You can't fall down 2-0 on the road, let alone fall down 2-0 at home. So with Detroit, I think it underscores real issues with their viability as an NBA finalist. With Dallas, I need a little bit more. Because if you're a little bit off because of how good your opponent is, and again, we saw this a year ago, right? Colorado cruised in game 1. If you're not on your game and the other team is, and you happen to be playing one of the other best teams in the league, games can get out of hand. So I want to see tonight whether Dallas looks more like the Stars team we expect before I go, panic time with the Dallas Stars. And I don't know if you're an Avs fan, maybe you're rooting for their demise. But I'll give Dallas another game. Detroit, that game, watching it, I was like, yeah, this is why I didn't really buy into Detroit as potentially coming out of the East. And then there's another one that I think going into the series you would label a mild upset, but with the circumstances as they are now, it's not that way at all. The Lakers beating Houston. Now, I was saying last week, Ray and I both, that we thought LeBron would turn back the clock in game 1. And that's exactly what he did. So the fact that the Lakers won is not surprising to me. My question was, can LeBron keep doing this throughout a 7-game series against Kevin Durant and the Houston Rockets? Well, if it's LeBron James going against the Houston Rockets without Kevin Durant, then that's a little bit different story. So Kevin Durant misses game 1, which either, when that news came down, I thought 2 things. Not both, but it would be one or the other. One, this is a really serious injury. Or the Houston Rockets think that the Lakers are such a pushover that they can afford to rest KD and still come back and win the series. Maybe it's the former. Because there's no guarantee Kevin Durant's going to play in game 2. And again, and I'll apply this to tonight with the Nuggets and the Wolves. I'll apply it to tomorrow with the Avalanche and the Kings. You cannot fall down 2-0. So if the Rockets don't play Kevin Durant in a game that they could potentially fall down 2-0, then this is a serious injury that even if Houston figures out a way to get past LA, and I guess this was the expected result anyway, they're going to get blown out by Oklahoma City. That's not even going to be a series. But for the most part, pretty chalky. Game 1s across both the NHL and the NBA. Take your thoughts. Which game 1 results are more real to you, or which upsets in game 1s are more real to you? 719-247-1313. We'll get back to the Avs Nuggets, the big ideas coming out of these 2 game 1s. But one other guy to speak to the depth that the Avalanche have shown. I talked about that third line. Putting Landeskog and Kadri on your third line just tells you that you are stupid deep. Like, that's just crazy that you could put the 2 of them on your third line. But ironically, the guy who I thought played the best on that third line was the other guy. It was Nick Waugh, the guy they acquired, and we thought he was going to have Nazem Kadri's role, and then they traded for Nazem Kadri. Jared Bednar says he wasn't surprised at how well Nick Waugh played yesterday.
Like, I remember him and watched a lot of his stuff before we got him from Vegas and the guys that he played with, and he moved up and down the lineup. He played with skilled players, whether it was Carlson and your Hurdle, like it's different guys. On the wing, he centered the third line there, and it was a highly effective line that helped him win a Stanley Cup, and it was a lot of not just good defensive hockey, but impactful offensive hockey as well. And that's what we talked about when we got him, and I think he can help contribute in that area, but I'm not surprised by it at all. I think he can continue to get better and better in that area.
And look, the happiest guy on the Colorado Avalanche yesterday was Nick Waugh, because if you're the Kings and you only have so many resources to dedicate to stopping the Colorado Avalanche and that third line rolls out there, I mean, who's your top priority? Kadri or Landeskog? Who's your second priority? The other guy. Who's your third priority? Well, it depends on who the defensemen are on the ice at that time. So Nick Waugh, and credit to him. I mean, I think this is intentional. Jared Bednar is one of the most intentional coaches when it comes to putting guys on certain lines. People would be surprised to see Parker Kelly on the second line and Gabriel Landeskog on the third. But trust me, Jared Bednar has thought about this 18 different ways. He's got a vision. He's got a thought on why he's doing this. He's not just throwing these lines together willy-nilly. But I got to imagine, with what he believes Nick Waugh is already, he's got to think, man, Nick Waugh can have some opportunities if I have Kadri and get Landeskog on that line, all of a sudden I sacrifice a little quality on the second line, putting Parker Kelly up there, knowing I still have Brock Nelson and Val Nichushkin. And then I can put a little bit more firepower on that third line. But as far as, Parker Kelly on that second line, I mean, when the Avs had the last change, that line was tasked with slowing down the one line that worries you if you're an Av when it comes to the LA Kings. It's that top line. It's Kempe, it's Panarin, it's Kopitar. That was that second line's job. That's why Parker Kelly was on that line. So I thought really good the way that Jared Bednar put together the lines. And the odd man out yesterday was Ross Colton. And I saw a quote from Jared Bednar earlier this afternoon when he met with the media saying, Ross Colton's got to be ready. Right? We're going to need him. And that's true. You've been through a Stanley Cup run with this Avs team. You know that, Ross Colton isn't going to be a healthy scratch the whole way through. Either because they're going to need his ability to score goals or because someone goes down. Ross Colton's going to play a role in the Avs winning a Stanley Cup. But it was a little bit surprising that it was Kiviranta over him for game one. Hard to argue with the results, though. Avs beating the Kings 2-1. Before I take a break for the top of the hour, want to let you know about Low T Center. They are the original TRT clinic, setting the standard in hormone health, while other clinics, they're just trying to catch up. With locations nationwide, including right here in Colorado Springs, Low T Center has helped countless men take control of their health through high-quality testosterone therapy. Now, you may be asking what separates Low T Center from the rest. Mentioned it. Quality. Low T Center uses only pharmaceutical-grade testosterone, never compounded products, so patients know exactly what's going into their bodies. And it's also care that matters. At Low T Center, every provider is board certified and trained specifically in hormone health. They are just, any way you slice it, they're the place to go. And right now, they're also offering advanced peptide therapies and GLP weight loss medications designed to support recovery, sleep, weight management, muscle tone, and overall wellness. And right now, you can get $50 off on select peptides and GLP-1s. And right now, there's no risk. I talk about this all the time with Low T. There's no risk because their testosterone test is free. So if you're thinking maybe it could be Low T that's keeping you from feeling your best, go and get a free test, and then you will know for sure whether it is or whether it isn't. And if it is, just know you're in the right place at Low T Center. Book your appointment today at lowtcenter.com. That's lowtcenter.com. The three stories that are driving the show coming up next. Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or whether you're watching the show anywhere you scroll, as long as you follow one of these fine two radio stations. Like, subscribe, comment, please. That's how this world of ours goes round. 719-247-1313 is the number to call or text if you'd like to give your thoughts on this Monday. That way, perhaps you have thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. All right, game one's abound. Let's start with the one on the ice.
Drury back with it. Sends it off a stick. Here's Logan O'Connor off the weird bounce. O'Connor! He scores! OC's playing, baby!
Connor McGahey on the call for Altitude Sports. You heard it on Extra Sports 1300. The Avalanche beat the Kings in game one, 2-1. And I thought it was exactly the game that LA wanted to play. I think the alternative is you get into a track meet with the Avalanche, and that would just be embarrassing. You need to play physical. You need to play tight checking. You need to take away time and space, and you need to hope for a low-scoring game. And that's exactly what game one was. The problem here is that the Avalanche are well-versed in these tight checking, low-scoring games. They know that skill, being able to win in those kind of games, is necessary to win a Stanley Cup. So it's a little, darned if you do, darned if you don't when it comes to LA. They're really just deciding which way they wanted to be dispatched in 4 or 5 games by the Avalanche. It really is, just because the Avalanche are so much better than LA. But LA played the game on their terms, the way they wanted to play. It's just that this Avalanche team can win this way. It's not their preferred method, but they can do it. They've done it plenty of times. And who are the guys that inevitably step up in games like this? Arturi Lehkonen. Every time Arturi Lehkonen scores a goal, I say, of course, because they're all the same. And it's the stakes are large. It's someone getting to the net. That's Arturi Lehkonen. It just is every time. So he scores the first goal. Logan O'Connor scores the second goal. He allegedly scored a third. We'll get into that topic later. But it's the depth of the Avs. Right? I thought the fourth line was the best line the Avs had. And what is LA supposed to do? They roll a line. 1. The Avs have 4. And when the fourth line is arguably the best line of game one for either team, that does not bode well for the LA Kings. So DJ Smith, the head coach of the Kings, can say what he wants to say, and I would expect nothing less for him to be defiant and say that they got the Avs right where they want them. But the fact is they don't. They don't. Because the Avs, if a game there's only 3 goals to be had, I'm going to trust the Colorado Avalanche against the LA Kings 10 times out of 10 to get to at least 2 of those 3 goals. But I do think on the flip side, it was a good game for the Avs to have to start, because you could see whether Scott Wedgwood was up to the task in his first playoff start, and he absolutely was. Made 24 saves. The only one that beat him was on a 6-on-4, and 2 guys were standing in front of him. He couldn't even see the puck. So I thought Wedgwood passed his first playoff test with flying colors. So I get why the Kings feel good about themselves. Can't, lose confidence after one game. Stay in the fight, LA. But the Avs have no problem playing that kind of a game. Now, I have a problem watching that kind of a game, but the Avs don't have a problem playing that kind of a game. 2-1, the final. Avs up 1-0, game 2 tomorrow night on Extra Sports 1300. Here's the other game 1 of the weekend.
Loose ball, Murray from half court. Banks it, no good, but that's a rebound. Rebound comes down to Denver, and now Denver can play more clock. Down low, a score. Got 2 hands! That puts the Nuggets up by 7 with 1:45 to go.
Cause on the call. Again, Altitude Sports as heard on 740 KVOR. I knew I was going to flip-flop them. That game was Saturday on KVOR. Nuggets win 116-105 over the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I feel like it was a 180 from the way that the series 2 years ago started between these two teams. The more frustrated team was Minnesota. The team that seemed to have fewer answers was Minnesota. The team that didn't look as healthy as their opponent was Minnesota. And the Nuggets were able, and that was an ugly game, kind of like the Kings and the Avs, and the Nuggets were able to show that they can win that kind of a game with their depth. I think there were a lot of similarities between game 1 for the Avalanche and game 1 for the Denver Nuggets. I thought Cam Johnson, once he got settled into the game, was very good. Bruce Brown, nobody was happier to be back in the postseason than that guy. And the catalyst was Jamal Murray in the second quarter with Nikola Jokic on the bench. I mean, if you want to be doom and gloom about the Minnesota Timberwolves, how about the fact that the Nuggets won the non-Jokic minutes? They outscored Minnesota when Nikola Jokic was off the floor. And I think you saw that frustration manifest itself a few different times, including when Jaden McDaniels pushed Nikola Jokic from behind unprompted, unwarranted, and unprovoked. That's their Jamal Murray throwing a heat pack. That shows that they don't have an answer for what this version of the Denver Nuggets brings to the table. But is a 7-game series? And for that, it will be story number 3.
He initiates the contact, he spills away, and then he gets rewarded for it. Jokic does the same thing. We got to be solid around that. But 16 free throws is a lot. 16 free throws, it's almost as many as we shot all game.
That is Timberwolves head coach Chris Finch doing the thing that I don't think any of us love, and that's making free throws a part of the conversation. But this is what you do when the team you're throwing out on the court is not enough to beat your opponent. You want to try and get the referees on your side. Don't blame Chris Finch for doing it, but just acknowledge what it is. It is Chris Finch going, I got no answers. This Nuggets team is better than we are. So I'm going to try and tip the scales our direction with the officiating. But the fact of the matter is, almost every single one of those foul calls, I'm not going to say everyone, because there are bad calls in every basketball game. There are multiple bad calls in every basketball game. The montages on Twitter look at all these. No, Jamal Murray's not that player. He wasn't foul baiting. He's one of the most ethical hoopers we have in this league. You were fouling him, which is, by the way, true to form from who you were in the regular season. The Wolves fouled almost as much as any team in the NBA. Now that Jamal Murray's healthy, you can't pressure him as much. He can fight through some of that. And he does draw contact. The vast majority of those fouls were completely legitimate, and Chris Finch knows it. But he's saying to himself, man, if we lose that game and Nikola Jokic goes to free throw line once, like, we're toast. So I got to launch this preemptive strike, get them to call fewer fouls, but it's really about Jokic. Notice he brings him up out of nowhere. Look, same thing that we were talking about with the shoe on the other foot 2 years ago. Right? The Denver Nuggets were frustrated. The Denver Nuggets were complaining to the officials. The Nuggets were trying to lobby the referees because they just knew they did not have enough. Now, I'm not saying this is going to end in a sweep, but ultimately it's who's going through, the Nuggets or the Wolves. The Nuggets are going through because they are enough different and Minnesota is enough different that what happened 2 years ago, it's not going to happen in this series. I don't fault Chris Finch for trying, and we'll see if the game is officiated any differently. I don't expect it to. But it's not the officiating. It's the fact that Anthony Edwards is not healthy. It's the fact that Naz Reid isn't healthy. And it's the fact that Jamal Murray is healthy. And the Nuggets have more options. They're deeper. And the Wolves have fewer options. They're not as deep. You saw that on display in game one. I expect a better played game tonight. But I still think in that kind of a game, the Nuggets, I take the Nuggets. That game, 8:30 on Extra Sports 1300. In the meantime, 719-247-1313. Your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. If there is a hockey version of the free throw discourse, meaning if there's some conversation in hockey that I loathe and hate that we have made no progress in this area as much as the free throw discourse in the NBA, well, we got that in game one between the Avs and the Kings. We'll talk about it next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. I'm debating whether to do a mock draft this year because of the Broncos not being a part of the first round festivities. And usually that's what it is. We do our mock draft to have you represent your favorite team, but also ultimately count down to win the Broncos pick. So you get some idea of what would be available for the Denver Broncos when they pick. So no worries if not, but I don't feel like I want to pick for all 32 or not 32 because the Broncos aren't drafting, but you get what I mean. I don't want to make all the picks. I mean, we'll talk about the draft. Certainly we have a little bit of a space here, Wednesday, even tomorrow a little bit to kind of get in the draft because the Avs don't play till tomorrow night and we don't have 2 games to talk about. We just have 1 in terms of the results. So we'll have some time here to do it, especially Wednesday. If you want to do it, you want to participate, let's do it. If you don't, no sweat. Still plenty of draft topics to discuss leading you up to Thursday. I don't want to put the draft on the back burner, but with the Broncos not having a pick and this being a local sports radio show, I just kind of want to see what the appetite is. So if you want to text in 719-247-1313, let me know if you'd be interested in representing your favorite team and what that team might be. And we'll see where the numbers are at and go from there. But back to the hockey. I swear, the year is 2050. The machines have taken over. Skynet has launched. And we still will not know what goaltender interference is. And I could have gone 1 series without discussing goaltender interference, and I didn't even get 1 game without goaltender interference. Jack Drury called for goaltender interference when Logan O'Connor scored a goal. It was disallowed on the ice, right? You got to find the indisputable visual evidence to overturn it. It was called no goal on the ice. Avs challenged. They lost the challenge because they always do. Jared Bednar's terrible at challenging goaltender interference. It all turned out okay for the Avs, though, and it turned out okay for Logan O'Connor because he was the one that got what proved to be the game-winning goal. Here's Jared Bednar taking a little bit different tone when it comes to his frustration with the disallowed goal.
I saw Jack Drury drive in the front of the net, and I saw Doughty make contact. Disguised it pretty well, but backs into him, knocks him off his edges into the goalie, and we shot it in the net. So, to me, I'd like to see it count. They saw it different. I'm not losing any sleep over it. Kill the penalty and move on.
Now, that is playoff Jared Bednar. If this were a random Wednesday in December, he would not be like, it is what it is. Because we know goaltender interference is one of his biggest pet peeves. So this is playoff Jared Bednar. This is, we got bigger fish to fry here. I'm not going to sweat it too much. But he would be if this were the regular season. It would be his whole thing after the game is over. Here's what happened. Okay? Jack Drury is skating in from the left side of the ice. Okay? The puck is on the right side. Jack Drury is trying to skate across the ice. Yes, right in front of the goaltender, which he is allowed to do, to try and set up a screen for the shooter or potentially be there for the redirect or rebound. That's what Jack Drury is doing. He's looping in, wanting to go right in front of the goaltender in order to screen him out. What Drew Doughty does, because he's been around the block, he's been in the league for 1 million years, veteran move. He just kind of backs up into Drury and knocks him into Anton Forsberg. As the shot is coming in and gets the goal disallowed. Drew Doughty knew what he was doing. But the question is, should that be goaltender interference? Jack Drury is entitled to the ice that he was skating through. Drew Doughty knocked him off of that into the goaltender. So how can somebody who is not trying to hit the goaltender gets hit into the goaltender by the goaltender's teammate and it be goaltender interference on the Avalanche? As far as goaltender interferences go, I will acknowledge that this is a grayer area. But I always look to what a utopia would look like. And the utopia in my mind would be if you are a player who is intentionally hitting a player into your goalie tough, that's going to be a goal. Your action caused him to take out your goaltender. And I saw a lot of people like saying, what's to keep, other guys from doing what Jack Drury did, like initiating contact. Well, you review it or you see it in live time, who initiates the contact. Because I could just as easily sit here and say, what's to keep every defenseman from here on out, anytime they feel like they're in a little bit of danger of giving up a goal, to just shove an opposing player into their goalie, which as a fan of goalies, I don't think is a precedent that goalies want set. You just dump a guy into your goalie. Like, what's to keep guys from doing that? And this is not an isolated incident. It happens. But guys don't want to put their goaltender in danger because you're talking about the risk of injury. But the opportunity has always been there for them. And apparently it would be goaltender interference on the opponent. Sounds like a pretty good trade-off to me. Yeah, my goaltender gets taken out, but at least the goal will be disallowed. It is a grayer area, but the bottom line is we still don't understand, like, what is goaltender interference? Right? Because it's not whenever the goaltender is contacted. That's not true. That was true on the Jack Drury play. That's not true all the time. Because players are allowed to go into the crease. They're allowed to make some contact. So it's not when you're in the crease. That's allowed. It's not. I've seen it's not when you draw contact with the goalie. And now it's not when the actions of an opposing player knocks you into the goalie. That's not goaltender interference. So what's goaltender interference? And if the Avs don't pull that game out, oh boy, that would have been, I waited 2 hours and 20 minutes to bring this up. Could you imagine if that was the decisive call and the Avs lost in overtime 2-1 or something like that? Oh, it'd be nonstop. But it's still worth bringing up because the NHL and its officials still have no better handle on that rule than they have at any point in my entire life. There has been no progress in this area, none. The advent of replay review has not helped. The institution of challenges has not helped. There's been no movement on this subject the entire time I've been watching hockey. And that's really my frustration. It's not like it's easy for me to complain and you just say, oh, well, it's because it went against the Avs. It is really my frustration with hockey as a whole. It is really, hockey is as close to a perfect sport as you're going to find. Everything about hockey I love. There are two things about the NHL specifically that I hate. Goaltender interference and the way that they manipulate the bracket to give us Dallas, Minnesota in the first round or Dallas, Colorado in the first round last year. That's really it. They're closer to perfection than any other league, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for perfection. It is such a subjective call, which I am okay with, but it doesn't seem like the referees have the leeway to go, well, wait a minute. Drew Doughty was the one that knocked Jack Drury into the goaltender. There should be a punishment to Drew Doughty, not a punishment to Jack Drury. And I think that's the problem when it's the what is a catch in the NFL, what is goaltender interference. It's always these subjective calls that they try to make objective. It's Drew Doughty's ice. No, it isn't. It's everybody's ice. It's my ice. Well, not my ice. I would get thrown out. It's everybody's ice. Everybody is allowed to go into that spot. When you tell me that's Drew Doughty's ice, Jack Drury has just as much claim to it as Drew Doughty does. So, no, it's not his ice, but they're trying to make a subjective call objective by throwing in these qualifiers. Did the contact interfere with Forsberg's ability to make the save? No question whatsoever. Right? That is not what I am disputing here. But was it the actions of Jack Drury that caused that contact? I submit that it was not. Drew Doughty should be punished for using Jack Drury to take out his own goalie. That's not a good teammate, Drew Doughty. Knocking guys into his poor goalie. There should be a punishment for that. So I thought it should have been a goal, but the bigger picture is they still don't know. They just don't know. And every hockey game I watch that has goaltender interference, set aside any rooting interest I may have in the game. Every game, I'm rubbing my temples like I just can't even. It's so bad. But I guess I should take a cue from Jared Bednar. Not lose any sleep over it. I didn't. You'll be pleased to know that I did not lose any sleep over that goaltender interference call. But it was one of the first things I wrote down in my notes for today. I'll tell you that much. You tell me, the goaltender interference, blocker charge, is that a catch? All of these calls that I don't think they're ever going to get figured out in any sport. 719-24-7, 1313. I did mention the NFL draft. There was kind of an interesting trade over the weekend. No? Shaking things up a little bit, shaking it up. And of course, the team that made the deal is the team that made the deal, because I can't make heads or tails about what this organization does on a daily basis. And yesterday was no different with the big NFL trade that is, again, changed the top 10 of Thursday's NFL draft. We'll get into that next here on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. As faithful, game 2 tomorrow night. It's go time. Watch the Avs battle it out in the Stanley Cup playoffs presented by Toyota. Get your tickets now at coloradoavalanche.com/playoffs. And I got some, and not, I mean, obviously you got a chance to go to the playoffs. Go. Come on. One of my big disappointments of the Avs game, but also just the Stanley Cup playoffs in general so far, you would have a hard time telling that it was the Stanley Cup playoff. And this is, look, no one's greedier than the NFL. So let's just put them in a league of their own and say that no matter what the NBA or the NHL or MLB does, they will never be greedier than the NFL, right? With the NFL moving games overseas, putting everything behind a paywall, like all this kind of stuff, they are the greediest bunch of owners in all of sport, okay? But there are levels to this. There are different levels to greed, okay? Somewhere on the ice, on television, and maybe it is there. It must be there on the ice at Ball Arena. But on TV, we don't see it. It's an ad. It's an ad for Tyson Berry's new beer company or whatever it is that he's pushing, or it's Ball, or it's like, can we have one spot somewhere? You know, this is the people that say you got to take a hard line because if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. The advertising on the ice and on the jerseys, right? I said, you know what? It's expensive to field baseball teams and hockey teams and basketball teams. One little tiny patch. I'm not so much of a purist that Ibarra on the chest of the Nuggets jerseys completely ruins it for me. Say, you know what? Take a little bit of real estate. It's fine. Because in my mind, I'm like, we're able to draw. I believe in humanity, and we're able to draw a line in the sand and say, we'll go up to this line. That's fine, but we won't cross it. Stupid me. Of course, they're going to cross that line, or the line's not going to exist. Can I get one patch, one sticker, one logo, one something anywhere on the players or on the ice that tells me I'm watching a Stanley Cup playoff game? You know, one thing, and I give Altitude some level of credit because they put the graphic on the scorebug, but I don't think that goes far enough. You need it somewhere, and I'm sure it is if you go out to Ball Arena. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But it just didn't feel like a playoff game yesterday. It really didn't. And the NBA did this. Remember, they didn't have the big trophy in the middle of the court, the big Larry O'Brien. Like, come on. You have 82 games to grab all the monies you can. And I get it. It's better real estate. It's more expensive. You charge more. But you have 82 games. Can that be enough? Can we set aside a spot on the court or on the ice to signify these are the most important games because our trophy is on the ice or the court? Our trophy is on the sweater or the jersey. Can we not do that? I mean, it seems like such a little thing, right? But it makes all the difference. Were you watching the game yesterday and going, it didn't feel like a playoff game? But money's the answer. What's the question? You know, we always do this. Shifting gears here. I don't know that money's the answer to this question, actually. And the question that I'm asking, and many people are asking, what are the Bengals doing? I don't think that there's a clear answer to that question. So the Cincinnati Bengals, just to catch you up, okay, last couple of years, they've been in a little bit of a spat with Trey Hendrickson, who over the past couple of years has been one of, if not the best pass rushers in the NFL. They don't want to commit to him long term. They franchise tag him, do all this kind of stuff. Finally, they let him go. He goes to Baltimore. Okay? But the Bengals have a top 10 pick this year. So if it were any other team, I'd be saying to myself, all right, it's a little weird that you're not committing to Trey Hendrickson or you don't want to keep him around, but maybe you know something that I don't. Maybe some of his medicals are off, maybe his age, whatever it might be. But this would be a perfect time for you to take the 10th overall pick and to use it on a pass rusher so you could have your next Trey Hendrickson, who is younger, more cost-controlled, and away you go, right? Well, the Bengals have traded their pick to get Dexter Lawrence from the Giants, who is older than all of these pass rushers, and he is set to get a massive payday. So I don't know what the answer to the question is, what are the Bengals doing? I just think they are in this elite group of teams. The Browns are in there. The Rockies have been in there for many years, where you just ask the question, what are they doing? And it's almost a rhetorical question, not because you know the answer, but because it is unanswerable. You can't find a logic to what they do. This trade makes no sense. And I'm not talking about Dexter Lawrence, the player. Right? Dexter Lawrence, the player, is a fine player. It's a good player. You had Trey Hendrickson. Or you had the 10th pick. You could have had Trey Hendrickson and the 10th pick. The Bengals essentially traded Trey Hendrickson in the 10th pick for Dexter Lawrence. Tell me how that makes any sense. But it's the Bengals. Right? You try to figure out what they're doing and your head's going to explode. But hey, good on the Giants. Dealing from a position of strength, they got arguably the best front seven in football. Yeah, they're going to take away from it a little bit with Dexter Lawrence, but the economics of the thing, probably smart for them to move somebody in that group. And maybe they decide to use the 10th pick on a pass rusher, on a Reuben Bain or someone like that. So I like this trade from the Giants side of it. I do. I still think there's enough there in the front seven to still be very good. You can still add to it if you want with the picks that you have. But if you don't decide to, now you can address another need of yours with an extra draft pick that you picked up. That is in the top 10. And if you want to say, well, you know, you could argue for the Bengals that taking out the Trey Hendrickson of it all, you could argue that Dexter Lawrence is a more proven commodity for a team that needs to win now with Joe Burrow. And I get all of that to an extent. But may I counter with how rare it is that teams make a move. But like a first-round pick, the 10th pick, that's what you're giving up. The last time a team made a trade like this, where we get a veteran player and you get a top 10 pick, Randy Moss went to the Raiders. Do you remember how that worked out? Do you remember how well thought of the Raiders franchise was when they made that move? and how it turned out for them. Like, you can't be beholden to history all the time. You got to, carve your own path and everything. But I don't think this was a smart move by the Bengals. But also, I'm bringing their previous history into it, I guess. In saying if the Bengals make a move, chances are it's not going to make sense. This one doesn't make a lot of sense. But it makes Thursday more interesting. And now we always, at different stages of the draft buildup, find a team that's really hot. Because could they move up? Could they move down? Could they stay? That team has become Kansas City. Depending on who you listen to, the Chiefs could either be picking third on Thursday, or they could be moving back. I've seen reports both ways. Chiefs are moving up. Chiefs are moving back. Chiefs are staying. Brett Veach last week said there would be a lot of movement. So people are like, is he talking about himself? So that's the team now that everybody's watching that could further shake up the top of this draft is Kansas City. I get the argument for moving up. I do. Because when you're as high up as the Chiefs are, and they could stay where they're at and get probably a better prospect than they've been able to get in many a draft now. But I kind of feel like if you can move up because they can with their extra draft capital, like, let me move up a little bit more. Like, if they're going to get the best offensive lineman in this draft because they're going to move up to 3, I think you do it. If they were like in the teens, I would actually argue that maybe moving back would be a better idea, or the late teens, I should say. Right? If they were picking 17, 18, 19, I could say, well, why don't you move back, see if somebody wants to jump into the first round and grab Ty Simpson, depending on how the draft board goes, and get more picks so you could build up the depth. It's a unique situation for a team that hasn't been picking even close to the top 10 for a long time. So I get why, I get the merits about, as a fan, I don't want to see them trade back. Not with that pick. You want to trade back with the pick you got from the Rams, but don't trade back from where you are. You're never in this position. If anything, push, go for it. See if Arizona is willing to trade down. That guy in Arizona, remember, he was the one that facilitated the whole Will Anderson thing when the Texans got Anderson and C.J. Stroud. They're not opposed to trading back. I would explore that. But if nobody wants to move out of the top 5, 6, 7, 8, then just stay there. Stay there, get a lineman or get a corner. And then use your other pick later if you want to move back because to accumulate more picks, or maybe you can do a little bit more in the second round the next day, then that's fine. But you need a lineman and you need a corner. The Kansas City Chiefs cannot leave this draft without addressing those two. And they probably needed to address them with their first 2 picks. Whenever they might happen. So we'll see what happens with the draft. 1 is set. 2, there's some talk about which player the Jets like. But they're not moving. I don't think they're moving. And then Arizona may be entertaining the idea of moving back in the draft. I think that would be talking about the Bronco perspective of it. I think that would make Thursday better if there are a lot of trades. And I know this from, waiting either because the Chiefs didn't have a first round pick or they're picking super late. Like, sitting through that draft can sometimes be Like, all right, just get on with it. I want my team to be on the clock. Well, if there are a lot of trades or if there's some surprises, that would certainly help things. It's going to be a busy night. NFL draft will have a hard time. I know everyone, NFL is king. Everybody watches the NFL. Well, the draft, you can kind of just pull up on your phone. So we got Nuggets and we got Avs playing both on Thursday night. Broncos don't have a pick. I think the main way that the NFL draft can penetrate the Colorado market, have a lot of trades. Everything go topsy-turvy. Then maybe some eyeballs will go in that direction. But that's coming up on Thursday night, as is Game 3 with the Avs and the Kings, as is Game 3 between the Wolves and the Nuggets. It was fun while it lasted, right? The alternating nights. And we'll get it tonight and tomorrow night, and then they're going to all be playing at the same time all the time. Now, on a different note, when it comes to hormone therapy, knowing what's in your body matters, right? That's why more people trust Low T Center, the original TRT clinic that's helped men across the country reclaim their health through safe, proven testosterone therapy. Low T Center uses only pharmaceutical-grade testosterone, not compounded products. That means consistency, safety, and transparency. If you're considering TRT, don't settle for compounded testosterone with unknown ingredients. Care doesn't stop with just simply medication. At Low T Center, patients are treated by board-certified providers who specialize in hormone health. They take the time to ask the right questions, monitor progress closely, and help patients reach personal wellness goals, not just lab targets. And the best part about all of this, it's risk-free because your testosterone test right now is free. So go in, get a test, see what they're all about. Book your appointment at lowtcenter.com. That's lowtcenter.com. That will be it for the show today. Appreciate your patronage. Don't forget, coming up tonight, 8:30, Nuggets and Wolves on Extra Sports 1300. That will be the primary topic of conversation this time tomorrow. Hope you'll join me for that. If you're listening on 740 KVUR, Mark Levin coming up next. Have a wonderful evening.